The Arctic is an incredibly important region for the country. It provides more than 10% of the country's GDP and 20% of exports. It contains a quarter of the world's unexplored oil and gas reserves. The Arctic's transportation capabilities are also enormous, as it's the shortest sea route from Europe to the New World and from China to Europe. Cargo traffic along the northern sea route is expected to grow tenfold over the next few decades. The Arctic also has a unique ecosystem, which is now under serious threat. As recently as the 1980s, the area of Arctic ice during the summer months was 8 million square kilometers. Today, there's almost twice less ice. Global warming is no abstract notion. Annual changes there are literally visible to the naked eye. The Arctic is vast. It takes up about 20% of the country's territory, not even including the ice-covered portions of the ocean. However, only 1.5% of Russia's population lives in this vast area. Arctic colonization began rather late. Murmansk, the largest city in the region, was founded only in 1915. This may be the reason why the cultures of indigenous peoples, the Sami, Nenets, Chukchi, Evenki, and many others, survive better there than anywhere else in Russia. Having suffered greatly from the industrialization of the region in the 20th century and from the Soviet tendency towards unification, they nevertheless often continued to live according to customs, such as reindeer breeding, hunting, and fishing. On the other hand, the very same Soviet industrialization transformed the Arctic into a modern urban region, and a rather wealthy one at that. Arctic wages in the USSR and today are much higher than the country's average. But investments in infrastructure virtually ceased after the collapse of the USSR. It turned out to be cheaper to produce minerals using workforce rotation systems than to build full-fledged living environments. The resident population in the Arctic has decreased dramatically as a result and continues to drop. In fact, Murmansk is at the top of the list of cities whose population has decreased the most since the collapse of the USSR. Soviet-era infrastructure is still in use, but sooner or later, a decision has to be made. Will the Arctic be a place to live, or merely a source for raw materials and military bases? The second option is easier for the state in the short term, but in the long run, the consequences of such policies can be dire, at least for the environment. If the concept of workforce rotation wins out completely, there will simply be no one to take care of the environment and to protect these vast areas from ruin by major producers of raw materials. It is possible and necessary to live in the Arctic. It's been proven for centuries by peoples who had much more primitive technologies than we have today. Only those who feel this place is their home and not merely a rented apartment will work to defend the local environment. Indeed, that's one of the most pressing problems, not only for the Arctic, but for the planet as a whole.